Welcome. I'm Vest, and today we're going to be talking about Solasta 2. What the game is about, its core features, and hopefully, by the time we're done, you're going to be just as hyped about it as I am. There's a lot to cover, so I'm mostly going to be talking about things on a more surface level. But if you like what you hear and want more in-depth videos on the game, be sure to subscribe, as I'm going to be covering things all the way up to early access, release, and beyond. With that out of the way, let's get to it. So, the grand question, what is Solasta 2? Solasta 2 is the up-and-coming CRPG by game developer Tactical Adventures, and a sequel to their original Solasta Crown of the Magister. The game will have you create a party of 4 adventurers as you embark on a journey to the island of Neokos. An ancient evil has awakened and threatens the world with her corruption, and it's up to you to challenge this evil, exploring the island as you please to discover its hidden secrets and dangers along the way, which you can do alone or with your friends. It's slated to be a fully fledged tactical RPG based off of the D&D 5.2 SRD rule set, with everything you'd expect from the genre. I'm talking robust strategic battles, an interactive storyline, and of course, in-depth character building and customization. If this is reminding you of stuff like Larian's Baldurs Gate 3 or the Divinity Original Sin series, then you're on the right track. I think one of the coolest things that sets Solasta 2 apart is that the developers have a massive dedication to translating the system to a video game format as accurately as possible. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the video though, there is something that you should understand before we move on. And that is what the D&D 5.2 SRD rule set actually is. It's basically the building blocks of D&D 5e, so it should be familiar to anyone who plays that on tabletop, or if you've played Baldur's Gate 3, you'll at least have an idea. Rolling for initiative, the action economy in combat with the actions, bonus actions, reactions, etc., and other basic rules will be as you expect. The key difference, however, is that any trademarked content by Wizards of the Coast is going to be missing. That means no monsters like Mind Flayers, no Displacer Beasts, or even Intellect Devourers. There's also going to be a more limited subset of published options, so things like subclasses, feats, and spells. Now that's not to say that there's not still going to be a really good amount of staple and iconic things. You're still going to have wizards casting Fireball, stuff like dragons are still fair game. It's just that there are more limitations on things when compared to a full D&D license like Baldur's Gate 3. Now I'm sure that probably sounds like a bad thing to some of you, but all it means is that Solasta 2 has its own content to fill those gaps. That means custom subclasses, spells, feats, and even monsters that really allow the developers to flex their creative muscles with their designs. As someone who's been playing 5e for almost 10 years, I personally think that keeps things pretty fresh, but even if you're not really keen on homebrew or custom content, there is still a good chunk of familiar things to keep you satisfied. The devs are actually going to be releasing an early access build on March 12th, so look out for that, but these are obviously going to be the building blocks of the game. A lot of what they plan to achieve is going to be added over the course of different updates, so we're going to have to wait and see how things grow. But with all that said, let's talk about character creation. As I said earlier, Solasta 2 will let you create and customize a party of 4 heroes, each with their own look, personality, and class. We've yet to see just how the actual character creator looks, but the developers have stressed this is something they really wanted to get right compared to the original game. There are 4 races confirmed for early access, which are humans, halflings, dwarfs, and elves. However, they expect to add more as development continues. For classes, we're going to have 6 going into early access, but the overall goal is that once they release, they're going to have all 12 base classes, with at least 2 custom subclasses for each. Going over the classes in detail could be its own video though, so let me know if that's something you'd like to see. If you are familiar with 5e or Baldur's Gate, you're gonna have a pretty good idea of how the base classes already work. For anyone who's completely new though, I'll quickly break them down. Fighter is your classic man-at-arms character, focused on using weapons and martial prowess to defeat their enemies. They're very versatile in how you build them, able to stand in the front line as a heavily armored party tank, or even a potent range damage dealer making up the backline. Rogue is your stealth specialist, focusing around using lighter weapons and armor, but dealing devastating single target damage through their sneak attacks. They're also incredibly skilled, able to perform skill checks better than most via their expertise, which gives them a bonus to a limited amount of skills of their choice. Paladin is your holy Oathsworn warrior, mixing martial might with divine magic to protect their allies and smite their foes. Often heavily armored and in the thick of battle, they have limited spellcasting to help keep the party buffed and alive. Cleric is your divine caster, capable of using powerful magic to both heal and harm. Able to play close to the front as a protector with heavy armor and weapons, or more so in the backline as a thaumaturge, this versatile spellcaster has a wealth of different buff and utility spells to keep the party alive and fighting, or to bring divine punishment to your enemies. Wizard is the premier spellcaster. They have their own spellbook, which holds all their different spells that they can learn, and compared with the other spellcasters, they're actually able to learn the most amount of spells, giving them a very wide toolkit for dealing with any problem you might come across. The trade-off though being that they're pretty squishy and need protection. And finally, you have the Sorcerer. This is a more focused spellcaster. They don't learn their magic, it's innate within them. And essentially, they have a smaller amount of spells that they gain when compared to, say, the Wizard. But in return, you have access to powerful meta magic options that let you change your spellcasting in unique and powerful ways. We also know that the level cap for this game is going to be level 10 on full release, and multi-classing is something that's going to be available straight from early access. For your core attributes, you're actually able to choose between standard array or rolling for your stats, which is really cool because that's how it works on tabletop. So there's going to be plenty of space to build out fun and unique characters. We touched briefly on story in the intro of the video, but honestly, as far as the details go, there's not really much more to say about it. The game is a sequel to Solasta 1, meaning other than the odd reference, you're not going to have to worry about playing the first game to understand the story of the second. Your 4 adventurers are all orphans who grew up together, went their separate ways, and then have now been reunited once more due to the death of their adoptive mother. Your familial bond is what takes you on the quest to the island of Neokos, where you're going to explore an adventure, eventually coming across Shadwin, a powerful witch who, along with her cult, wants to spread death and corruption. While we don't know much more than that at the minute, I'm personally super excited to see what the story has to offer, as it was one of the lighter aspects of the first game. They've also brought in a ton of professional voice actors this time around, including Ben Starr, who you'll know from Final Fantasy XVI, shout out to my boy, Amelia Tyler, who you'll know as the narrator from Baldur's Gate 3, Ellen Thomas, who played Ambessa in Arcane, and Deborah Wilde, who you'll of course know as Lae'zel from Baldur's Gate 3. This is an absolutely stacked cast, so you know we're going to get some really cool scenes as we go through the story. Speaking of voice acting though, another thing that's really cool with Solasta 2 is that each of your characters are fully voiced. What's sick about that is they all take part in every conversation instead of just standing there in the background like some other games. This makes your whole party feel a lot more involved in the narrative and allows your characters with the most appropriate skills to actually use them. So if you want to, say, intimidate somebody one moment with your barbarian, you can do that. Or maybe your wizard has some expert arcane knowledge that's going to be relevant to what's being said, so you can instead have them chime in. I think that's a really cool way to do it because so many games have this issue where your guys just kind of stand in the back while your main character does all the talking. Your characters also have several personality flags that you're going to get to choose at character creation, which determine how they speak and how they act. One interesting thing that's tied to that is something they're calling your family role. This sets the party dynamic between your characters and how they interact with each other. So an example of that would be maybe the paladin is the big brother of the group, you know, is very sort of like overprotective of everybody, whereas maybe your sorcerer is the neglected middle child and, you know, throws tantrums and such. It's a pretty unique feature by the sounds of things. We don't really know exactly how it works, but we'll have to wait and see. Your choices in the game will also have more than just story consequences, as there's a faction system. We've been introduced to 4 so far, but there's going to be a lot more once the game comes out. Depending on who you help out, you'll gain favor with the different factions, which can lead to stuff like story changes, and they'll also be tied to companions that will be able to join you on your quests. One faction in particular is pretty interesting. They're known as the Combers, and that's a, like, you know, with a hair comb, not like a coma. Anyway, They offer this loot retrieval service, which saves you the trouble of picking up all your different weapons and armor and just anything you find out in the field. They actually collect and sell that for you and then give you your gold once you return to town. So it kind of saves your time and bag space when you're out adventuring, which is a pretty neat quality of life feature. Moving on though, let's get to the thing I personally love the most about games like this, the combat and the exploration. As I said, at its core, this game is based on the D&D 5.2 SRD rule set, which from a rules perspective, again, is basically D&D 5e 2024. That means tactical, turn-based combat where you roll initiative before taking alternating turns over a number of rounds. As is standard, everything from attack rolls to skill checks will be done via rolling dice, just like on the tabletop. And you'll also be able to take an array of different actions, bonus actions, and reactions, some general like opportunity attacks and readied actions, as well as of course, some based on your class choices. There's also a cover system that works pretty one-to-one with the tabletop rules, taking into account things like your frontliners blocking line of sight for your range characters. So you're really gonna have to be strategic with how you position everybody. Again, if you're a fan of 5e or you love tactical RPGs like I do, you're gonna be right at home. You'll also be able to explore the whole island of Neokos freely via a 3D hex-based world map. Honestly, what they've shown so far looks incredibly cool. It kind of reminds me of like a 4X game, similar to like the Endless series, or like, I guess Civilization's probably a bit more familiar. But the way it works is that travel is tied to a number of movement points, representing how far you can move before your party gets tired. There's a bunch of different systems planned for the exploration layer, including light resource management, where you're gonna need rations and supplies to keep yourself going. As you travel, you're gonna be able to discover hidden locations, have random encounters, and even fight stuff like mini bosses. There's also, of course, gonna be set encounters out in the world that aren't gonna change between playthroughs, but the random encounter stuff is gonna add so much replayability to this game, as you're always gonna have a different experience depending on what you come across in your run. On top of that, you're also gonna have random narrative events that can happen with multiple choices on how you approach them. These are often gonna have skill checks attached to them to determine your success and can lead to things like combat, rewards, and other outcomes. The map is also gonna be made up of different biomes, each coming with their own unique challenges, determining which monsters and events you might come across, as well as affecting things like how many movement points it takes to cross through that tile. So, you might have something like a desert that's easy to traverse through, but it's gonna tax your rations as, of course, there's no bushes, there's not many animals to hunt out there. Whereas something like dense wilderness might be a lot harder to move through, but it's gonna be resource abundant. These biomes are gonna have completely different monsters that you can come across, different hazards, different events, etc. There's also a day and night cycle, with night travel being possible if you decide to really push your party to the limit. Doing this though can actually have negative effects. I believe they are temporary, but they last until you get a proper rest. And nighttime travel is going to be much more dangerous due to lower visibility and more monsters hunting, which really gives you this kind of conundrum on if you want to save the extra time getting somewhere by traveling through the night or resting just to be safe. There's also a crafting system planned, though not much has been said about this just yet. So those are all the main things we've been introduced to. However, there's a ton more features that the developers would like to make. Things like a dungeon maker for custom encounters and campaigns, or even things like mod support, but they're making no promises at the minute since there's so much to do, and of course, the game is still in development. Rest assured though, if they put out anything new, you guys will be the first to know about it. There's honestly so much to look forward to with Solasta 2, but hopefully this video has given you guys a good overview of what the game's all about, and hopefully you're, a little bit hyped for it. The game is definitely going to cater to people who love story, as well as number crunchers like myself, and everything in between. But yeah, so that's going to be everything for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, honestly, it has been absolutely ages since I've posted, I know, but don't worry, we are back. We are going to be covering Solasta in great detail, so definitely subscribe if you want to know more. And yeah, let me know what you think about the game down in the comments, or just say hello, because again, it's been a little while. But for now, this is Vest, signing off.